Hello and welcome to this week's edition of 50 Years Serving the Island, a series of programmes showcasing highlights from Manx Radio's archives, using the station's first 5 decades serving the public in the Isle of Man. In 1968, Manx Radio was transferred into public ownership and became the island's public service broadcaster. Throughout this year, we'll be looking back and celebrating the breadth of programming that Manx Radio has shared with listeners over that time, reflecting the island's community, arts, culture, sporting life, heritage and changing political climate over the last 50 years. One of the key strands in Manx Radio's programmes over the decades has been farming and countryside matters, and today we revisit a special edition of the farming programme focusing on the importance of bees. Presented by John Kennaugh, it was broadcast in 2001.
Well, good morning everyone and welcome to this week's edition of the Farming Programme. I'm John Kennaugh, and each week at this time we aim to bring you topics of interest from the Manx countryside in general and from farming in particular. Now this week I'm reminded as I start this programme of a poem that I learned in St John's School many years ago, and it ran something like this. Mine be a cot beside the hill, a beehive's hum shall soothe my ear. A willowy brook that turns a mill with many a fall shall linger near. The swallow oft beneath the thatch shall twitter from her clay-built nest. Oft shall the traveller lift the latch and share my meal, a welcome guest. There's another verse, but that escapes my memory, and the reason that I've quoted that to you is because today we've come to a setting that almost mirrors what the poet wrote. Just over the hedge here we have a willowy brook that just further downstream turns a mill, and just in the corner of this field, fenced off and here in all their spring glory, are a row of beehives, and if you listen in a minute I'm sure you'll hear the beehives hum that the poet referred to. I happen to believe that beekeeping and farming are inextricably joined. We work together very well, and I have some very good friends in the Beekeepers Association. I usually manage to get to the convention at St John's in November each year to talk to them, but this year I missed it. So I'm making up for that now, and I've come out into this idyllic little spot to talk to a man who has spent a lifetime looking after bees. Tom Williamson, you've been guest on this programme before, but you're a countryman at heart, aren't you?
Yes, certainly. Nothing like being outside in the sunshine and enjoying what nature has to offer.
You spent a lifetime in a houseman's country in the county of Shropshire. What was your work there, Tom?
I was a country vet on my own, and beekeeping actually fixed in quite well, because the thing was, it was an old saying that at May Day, you don't need the vet anymore.
So that's when the bees took over your time.
That's right.
And did your love of nature and the natural order, is that what stimulated your interest in beekeeping?
Well, to a certain extent, actually. We started off, my wife went to a course, the WI, on grafting and budding. And so I decided, really, we should have some apple trees. She came back and said, oh, it's quite easy to do. So I started and budded some apple trees from rootstock, and actually I bought 12 rootstock and 10 of them took, which was very good in regards to. And then you want, whenever you've got fruit trees, you've got to have bees to fertilize the fruit at the correct time. So the next thing was someone, well, it's a client of mine, she was a teacher at the local school and she became allergic to bee stings, and you've got to get rid of the bees, so you can imagine what had it. I had it. I went back to my wife and said, you wouldn't like any bees? And she said, no, I don't think I would. But anyway, next day we had the bees, and I've had stuck with them ever since. The main thing, I think, with beekeeping is you learn by handling bees You learn by experience more than anything else. In other words, you can have all the bookkeeping, you can have everything, but there's one thing about beekeeping, it's management is a sole stunt. An empty beehive never produced a jar of honey, just like the old saying, farmers, as you can hear it over here as well, that concrete never produced a pint of milk.
That's true.
In other words, it's the way you keep stock,
Yes.
doesn't matter whether it's bees or anything else, is whether you get fruition.
Yes. Now, down here, Tom, we've come up from the farmyard, over the hill and down across the field to a little place that your friend called Nowhere Land. It can't be seen from anywhere. Is this an ideal spot?
Very great. It's ideal because the point is you don't get children throwing stones at the hives and things like that, because by the time they've got here, they're ready to walk back home.
What makes this, apart from its isolation here, what about the flora
Well,
around about
the
here?
most important thing is we've got plenty of tree blossom. In other words, there's plenty of, at the present time, we've got pussy willows out in flower, which is one of the first pollens that the bees go for.
Right.
And as long as they've got pollen, which is the protein, and you give them carbohydrate in the form of sugar syrup, they will start to breed.
Right.
And the sooner you get them breeding, the more honey you're going to get, because you've got to get them going. For when you've got to have plenty of bees when the flowers come.
Now, as I love honey and we eat lots of honey, but would we be able to detect in the honey how the bees have gathered?
Oh, definitely. You can tell actually from the pollen grains that are in the honey, you can say whether actually it's imported honey or not. And that's one of the reasons why honey produced in the local vicinity is so much better for people that suffer from asthma.
Right.
Because it actually contains the pollen grains in small doses over a period of 12 months. If you take honey, it'll often cure or make asthma a lot less effective.
Right.
And that's one of the things of honey. This I do know from personal experience that people have actually been very, very allergic to the pollen of oilseed rape.
Right.
The thing about it is when they take the honey daily over the 12 months, they haven't suffered nowhere near as bad.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, we're all kitted out here in boiler suits, in veils and gloves. So we're going now to the hives, Tom.
Yes.
You're going to open the hives up and
That's
we're going to have a
right.
look inside.
That's right, and I'll try to explain as I go on what
Well,
we'll
that's good.
see.
That's a bit of hands-on for me as well. The bees are flying, Tom, aren't they?
Yeah,
They're very, very
good,
active.
Very active indeed. And the thing about it is there isn't a lot of trouble, actually. The first thing you look at in the springtime is whether there's a lot of rubbish in the front of the hives, in other words, whether there's any mice have spent the winter inside the hive.
Is it unusual for bees to be so active at this time of the year, then?
No, not really. It's as soon as ever you get a nice day or two, they will start flying. In fact, you'll see in a few minutes how much brood they've got.
Now, we've come to the first hive, and your
Yes.
friend, Tom, introduce me to your friend.
Yes, this is John Evans, who's actually very good in the theoretical side. He's passed most of the exams with the BBKA. As I say, together I mind the practical side, and he's the theoretical side.
It's a bit like Jack Sprat and the wife, isn't it? If you've got the theorist and the more pragmatic type, then John, you've spent a long time studying bees, then.
Yeah, well, I've been involved in bees for about 20 years now, and it's only in the last probably 5 or 6 years that I've taken a much more active interest than I did before.
And do beekeepers just sort of naturally find one another? Is that how you work?
I think they do actually, from that point of view.
Right. So
there's an infinite affinity from that point.
Right. So Tom has got the smoker going here now, and we're going to have a look inside this hive. Tom, tell us what you're finding.
First of all, that they're well up, right up against the crown board. We've just taken the crown board out, and they're right up at the top, which is a good sign.
Tom, there's a lot of bees here.
Yeah, that's right. We'll take out the outside frame out first. It's got no bees on it.
Right. Do they always start from the centre then?
Well, yes, they always have the nest in the centre of the frames.
Right. I'm jolly glad I've got this veil on and gloves. There they are.
You see there, we're getting towards the brood nest now. And actually, you can see the pollen stored in the centre and the nectar around the outside. Well,
Tom, just for my benefit, explain the difference. I know I should know, but just for a layman, you said pollen and nectar.
yes, pollen is the protein and nectar is the carbohydrate. It's a sugar.
Right.
It's what actually the nectar is from the plants which the bees turn into. There's the queen, look.
Oh, I see it.
Yes.
Mark green.
Is that your mark, Tom?
Yes, we put a mark on them so that they're easier to, and it tells the year in which they, in other words, that was the last year's queen.
So it's not only cattle that's tagged and
No,
marked?
that's right. But that's lovely, she's great.
Would you have recognised it without a mark?
Oh yes, you've got to learn to recognise it, but actually,
It would have taken me a long time to identify her in there.
would it? Well, you can see, if you look at it, how much the abdomen is beyond the end of the wing,
Oh, yes.
in
Yeah,
contrast to the others.
I can see.
And actually, down there, you can see grubs,
Oh, right.
you see, before they're capped.
Right. Now, this is the next frame coming out
Yeah,
now.
That's right. That's another, there's plenty of...
Will we only find
Ooh.
one queen in here, Tom?
Only one queen. Again, you get some drone cells occasionally amongst them.
Are they the ones that's raised up a bit higher?
That's right, they're convex. See, there's a ready drone. In other words, they'll very quickly now could raise queens. Because once the drones are there, then they can raise a queen.
Right, just explain then the role of the drone.
Well, the drone is the male,
Right,
and he doesn't do any work. All he does is live for the day when the queen goes on a mating flight, and he mates with the queen in the air, and then he dies. There's usually about 10 or 12 drones mate with the queen,
Right.
and it's the strongest drone
right.
which is able to fly fastest. In other words, it's nature's way of
Selecting the best.
yes, that's right,
That's remarkable.
that's right,
But I think we've long believed that nature has her own ways of
Oh,
doing her
yes.
own things, hasn't she?
that's right. Of course, the thing is that you can artificially inseminate bees, and the first time I saw it was in Cologne when I went with the Kent beekeepers about 15 years ago, when we first saw artificial insemination of bees.
Is that available on a commercial basis, Tom?
Oh yes, they actually at experimental places and that sort of thing. For early queens, they often use artificial insemination, and also if they specifically want a strain of a certain bee.
Yes.
In other words, they can guarantee it then.
Right. Right. So we're moving along now to the next hive. We're going systematically along this row. The top has been taken off, and there the syrup that you've been feeding them on, Tom,
Yes, there's still some syrup.
is still there.
So it means that they're not too short.
But it was essential that you gave them that syrup.
Oh yes, the thing about it is you make sure then they're not being held back by shortage of, and the thing about it is they will utilize the syrup quicker than actually they have to dilute the honey down before they can use it.
Mm.
And as you can see, there's still quite plenty of stores
Yeah.
in there ready. But these are all actually on a brood and a half, so that this will be...
So here again in this one, Tom, we can see that they're actually starting in the middle.
That's right, yeah, there you are.
We haven't spotted a queen in this hive yet,
Not
Tom.
yet, no. No, I'm looking actually for a frame to transfer into another nuke because they're very weak.
Oh, really?
And so what we're going to do is insert this frame, which making sure that there's no queen on it.
Right.
That's a drone, look, already. See, there's a drone,
All right. Much bigger.
much bigger. You see, and the eyes are much bigger. The whole body is bigger.
Right.
Take one of
You would have to be very, very careful, Tom, that you didn't actually take, when you're taking a frame out of that you didn't actually take the queen out.
Oh, yes.
It would be disastrous, wouldn't it, for the...
Oh, yeah, well, that's it. You would, yes, there's still brood there.
You're listening to 50 Years Serving the Island, a series showcasing highlights from the Manx Radio archives from the station's first 5 decades as the Isle of Man's public service broadcaster. Today we're revisiting an edition of the farming programme, and in this episode, John Kennaugh is in conversation with beekeeper and vet Tom Williamson.
Tom, there is a lot of work with bees, isn't
Oh,
there?
yes, there's a lot of work, and it's particularly during the summertime. You've got to examine them from now on till the end of July, at least every week to 10 days.
Right.
Each hive.
What would you be looking for as you examine them then?
Well, first of all, to make sure there's no queen cells. In other
Right.
words, they're not going to swarm.
Right.
That's the most important thing, and of course make sure before that is that they've sufficient room to bring, if they want to bring in the honey, that they've got sufficient room to store it. Because if they haven't sufficient room to breed and store the honey, then you're in trouble, because the thing is that they will definitely swarm.
And we're just into the we're into the third hive now, and we're still taking the frames out of this
Hold
one.
on to that. It's a dud. In other words, it hasn't survived the winter. But actually,
The colony hasn't survived, Tom?
no, that's right. We have to.
So how will you address that problem?
Well, we have to put new frames in, and a new queen and brood, and make it up from a nucleus.
So when will you do that?
As soon as ever we've got spare queens, because we're actually breeding queens, and as soon as ever we can, we'll either do that, or we can actually artificially swarm another colony, rear a queen with brood, and insert it in, start again.
So what will have gone wrong there, Tom? What will have happened to that?
Probably something's happened to the queen during the winter, because it had got food in, but there wasn't any, the bees they'd succumb because they hadn't got a queen.
Right. So we move along to the next one then. This looks much better, Tom.
Oh yes, that's right.
These ones are right against the top as well.
Yes, these are right. See the pollen on the legs
Oh,
of
yes.
the bees? Wait a minute, you'll see another one in a minute or two. But they're in the pollen baskets, as they call it,
Yes,
on
yeah,
the legs.
yeah.
And that's why they carry the pollen back from the flowers back to the hive.
So where will they have got this pollen, Tom, today?
Probably from the pussy willows. The pussy willows is the chief thing that's out at the present.
How would you describe the sort of behaviour of the bees, Tom, at the moment? Are they...
Oh, they're very good. As you notice, we haven't even bothered with a smoker at all.
When would you use the smoker then?
When they get aerated, nothing much. When you can't control them otherwise.
Right.
But, there's some more brood. They've got brood right up into the top.
Yeah.
Brood box.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Mm.
John,
Yeah.
what do you see here now?
There's a queen.
We think that's the queen,
Right.
the current queen.
Yes, there
she's
we
not,
are.
she's not marked.
Here we are.
Oh right.
Can you get them
But you've spotted her without a mark.
without a mark? Just let her get into the middle of the comb if we can. That's it. We're putting the queen cage over the top of the queen, on the comb,
Now this is
trapping her underneath.
a little circular ring with a mesh in the middle,
That's right.
and the queen is now trapped. And presumably you're going to mark her, are you?
That's right.
So how long have these methods been in place, Tom? Is it
Years.
right? Well, we're
Oh,
just
that's the one. That is the queen.
now there we are. She seems to have got out of the cage, and we've got to mark her before. Oh no, we've moved the cage. Right. John has
We'll
got the
see.
marking pencil here.
Let's just make sure where we are. There she is.
Well, there we are. We've got a trap now in the bee cage, in the queen cage rather. And Tom is about to mark her. She's got the marking pencil. And there she is, and she's got the mark on her. Now he lets her go again. Well, there we are. There she is.
Green mark.
With a good mark on, yes.
That's last year's.
Quickly found, Tom?
That's right. But the thing is, it's easy to find the queen this time of the year because there isn't a lot of bees. And it's always as well, whenever you see a queen, if you've got somebody to help you.
Right.
Because the thing is, once you take your eyes off, just like a sheep, once you take your eyes off her, she's gone, you never see her again. But the thing is, if you've got somebody to help you, you can keep your eyes on it, and then you're all right. As long as one of you can keep your eyes on them, then everything's okay.
So that's why we brought John Evans along this afternoon.
That's right. Yes, you can only...
So are colonies that much different in their characteristic then? Do they behave differently?
Oh yes, the thing about it is that you can get queens which lay very early. For instance, Italian type of bees often are much more, they lay a lot more. That was one of the reasons why they weren't very popular, because they'd outlay their reserves. In other words, they'd die from starvation.
Right, so we're doing well. We're moving along to the next one now. And John Evans has already got this one opened up for us. Is this a good one, Tom?
Yes, that's right. The bees are up on the top in the halves. There's still plenty of food there.
Well, as Tom disturbs these sections now.
Yes, you see there again.
There we are.
There's brood.
So far, Tom, are you relatively happy with what you discovered?
Yes, they look very healthy.
And do you judge the health of it then by the amount of activity?
Oh yes, and by the amount of brood.
Right.
If there's no brood, then it's a reason to get worried, really, to make sure that they've got a queen. And if they haven't got a queen, then you do something about it.
Right. So now we're down in the bottom of this hive, in the bottom
Box.
Bottom box, yeah. And there is a lot of activity down here.
Yes.
Well, they are very, very busy. And Tom examines this one very carefully.
Yeah, we just look for the queen.
Well, you're still looking for the queen on this one?
Well, you do automatically.
Will she be marked in this one, Tom?
I don't know.
All right.
I can't just remember offhand.
Right.
I do keep notes actually, but we haven't had time to look.
Well,
at
it
them.
would take me a long time to find a queen in this one.
Oh,
I wouldn't.
surprising you.
But I must say this is the closest I've been since my school days, because at St John's School with George Sale we used to get into hives. I don't remember having veils and suits then, but
Yes.
don't remember being stung either for that matter.
There she is.
Oh, he's found her.
Yes. And I don't think she's marked, is she? No.
So we're going to mark this queen again.
No, we're going to, if we can get her.
It's remarkably...
This is what I say. Once she went underneath that from one side to the other, then if you lose sight of her, you can't always pick her up again.
I must say it's remarkably similar to some farming activities, and a large pen of sheep is something similar.
That's right, you've got to keep your eye on them.
You really have, Tom.
That, it's surprising, really. Once you...
Have we just lost her for the moment?
Yeah, I don't know whether we can find her again. She could have hopped onto another comb or anything.
Right.
But never mind.
But she's there, and that's the main thing.
That's right. Yes. If there's brood there, you know there's a queen.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing.
And are bees like stock, Tom? Do they respond to how they're handled?
Oh yes, that's right. The thing about it is you mustn't drop the frames, because that upsets them.
Oh, I would think
And
so.
that's why sometimes when we lifted the top brood box off, if the frames from the bottom box stick to the bottom,
Right.
that's when they were getting a bit upset.
Tom, before we go to the other hives now, could you just sort of sum up for us? We've come about to the end of our tape. We're just coming to the end of our tape. We've got a few more hives to go here. But perhaps you could just sum up on what you've found today and, your opinion of what the prospects for the season are like.
The point is, we've only got one actually dud.
Right.
In other words, all the rest of them have got about wintered all right.
Is that a fair sort of average? Would you expect?
Oh yes,
you expect some to go out?
Yes, I mean you can't always expect a queen to last indefinitely, and if she dies or is destroyed in the autumn, then the chance of is that you'll lose the colony, because the point is there's no queen,
Right.
and it loses its momentum. In other words, it keeps them going.
Yeah.
If they've got no queen whatsoever, then they won't last.
Right. So as John Evans builds this one up again for us, Tom, that's about all we have. We're about at the end of this tape. It's been a fascinating exercise to join you here. I'm jolly glad for the veil and the suit, Tom.
Well, the point is, I'm quite sure you're quite satisfied. We've never even used a smoker.
No.
Although we've had it.
That's right.
In other words, we've managed to manipulate them without the smoker, and that's wonderful. I mean, the thing about it is, if you've got to smoke them every time before you go near them, it upsets them.
Yes.
With the quieter you are with them, and the less smoke you use, it's far better than using a lot of smoke and getting them all irritated.
So what's this? Has this been a good day then, Tom?
Oh, wonderful.
Are the bees happy, or
Yes.
are you happy?
Yes, I'm very, very pleased that we've managed to get a good day, sunshine and everything else, and that we're not affected them. We haven't chilled any brood from cold wind or anything like that.
Right.
So that it's an excellent day for the job.
One last word from John Evans then. John, you've been here with Tom now this afternoon. Are you impressed with Tom's hives here?
Yes, indeed. They're coming along very well indeed for the time of the year.
And what do you think about the prospects for the summer and for the crop through the summer?
Beekeepers are always optimistic. It's
Are you like farmers though? I expected you to say you'll get an average crop. There can be good average and bad average, but it'll always
indeed.
be average.
Yes, indeed. That's quite true, but we're hoping for a good summer this year.
Well done.
Mhm.
And I think on the island, Tom, and I think elsewhere as well, there's a very good relationship between the farming community and the beekeepers associations. I hope that continues for a long, long time.
Yes, well, the thing about it is, you won't believe it, but even today, people have contacted me and said, "Can you bring us some bees?"
Right.
And that's wonderful.
So the interest is growing.
Yes, that's right. In
Tom
other words-
Williamson, thank you very, very much for all you've shown me this afternoon and for being my guest today on today's programme.
Right, bye-bye.
Well, that's all we have, ladies and gentlemen, for you this week, and this is John Kennaugh signing off until next week's programme.
John Kennaugh in conversation with beekeeper and vet Tom Williamson on the farming programme back in 2001. And you can hear that programme in full, along with additional content from the Manx Radio archives, online at manxradio.com/portal.